Hey guys, welcome back to the Guilty as Charged podcast presented by the Blue Wire Podcast Network. Very happy today to be joined by a special guest who covers the Chargers for the LA Times, Mr. Jeff Miller. Jeff, thanks for taking the time to join me. How are you doing today?
I'm doing fantastic. Thank you. And thanks for having me on.
Yeah, super excited about this conversation. I know everybody really is very excited about football season coming up, and it's a little weird not having a fourth preseason game, but I think a lot of players probably are pretty excited about that. Before we jump into the nitty and gritty conversation, I want to get your thoughts on what everybody's kind of been talking about recently, which is, of course, the decision by Brandon Staley and company to cut Tyron Johnson. Got off to a very hot start for training camp. People kind of expected him to be, a major factor on this offense. Were you surprised by the decision to cut Tyron Johnson yesterday, or 2 days ago, rather?
Yeah, I think we all were a little bit surprised. I think most of us had him making the team, and just based on what he did last year, and this team still needs a deep threat. We know Jalen Guyton can get deep, but that's the one thing that Johnson did better than probably anybody, and that's the one thing he did give them. At least when he burst on the scene last year, those first few games, he was spectacular. But it came down to, I think, just a matter of special teams. Really, it just these positions get so tight, and I think fans probably maybe think that's a cop out or something, or don't really understand completely that these spots they fill up really fast. And when they decided
Yeah.
to keep three quarterbacks, which again we all were a little surprised by that, I think all of a sudden it got even tighter. And you can only keep so many guys who really aren't going to contribute much on special teams. And guys like Keenan Allen and Mike Williams and your stars who you don't want to put in the position where they have to also be playing kick game and all that stuff. So and unfortunately, Tyron just didn't. He had returned some kickoffs a little bit last year. It didn't do that great, and wasn't an option to return punts. So that's the reason why it really comes down to that. If he could return punts, he'd probably be on this team in place of KJ Hill. But KJ Hill can return punts, and that's really the difference. I think what it came down to between the two.
Yeah, so I was at the first weekend of training camp. That was the only weekend I was able to make it out, and they did some punt return drills, and it was pretty clear that Jalen Guyton and Tyron Johnson were not super comfortable back there in comparison to KJ, like you mentioned, and Austin Prohl as well, who was recently signed on the practice squad today.
Yeah, it's really you see those. It's funny that you were out there right at the beginning of camp, and that stuff you see early in camp means as much as the stuff at the end, because these
Yeah,
teams don't mess around. Like when you see stuff out there, it's usually what you see is usually reality, and you saw it. I mean, right early on, neither one of those guys looked real good back there catching punts, and I think really early on, unless Tyron really went crazy and in the preseason games, or just I think he was just fighting an uphill battle just because of that special teams. His inability to contribute much on special teams. But like you say, you see it early on, and it's just stayed true throughout the entire training camp. Even when he had some nice moments during camp, that reality was still there facing him, and the coaches all knew that.
yeah, just an unfortunate spot, and hoping for him. They're hoping for some continued success down there in Jacksonville. I want to shift gears a little bit and talk about just kind of like the overall operation of training camp, because you've obviously covered the Chargers through Anthony Lynn and now with Brandon Staley. And I know Joe Reedy kind of talked about one thing that really stood out to him in terms of Brandon Staley's operation was that he had never seen so many special teams drills in training camp, in an NFL training camp before. What has been kind of your impression of the way that Brandon Staley is operating right now as a head coach, and what have you seen throughout training camp so far?
Well, I can tell you exactly that Joe was right on. And so this week we were talking to Tom Telesco, the general manager, and Joe mentioned all the special teams periods. And I
Yeah.
can tell you that Tom's reaction to that was, Joe, why do you think we did that? which is which was his way
Yeah.
of saying we all saw what we saw last year too. Everybody saw the same thing, which was this team really
Right.
had a hard time with special teams. So that was the one thing that jumped out from training camp to all of us, was just they really emphasized special teams in a big way, like a way that we never saw under Anthony Lynn. And the other thing they did that was interesting, and just I mean, Staley's attention to detail is just remarkable. And one of the things that they would do with these special teams periods, they would mix them in the middle of an offensive period, offense going against defense. Then they would mix in these team periods. Then they would mix in a special teams period. Then they go back to teams, 11 on 11, 7 on 7. Then they would mix in another special teams period. And what they were trying to do is mimic a game. So you'd have the offense would be out there, and then they'd get stopped, and then they'd come off the field, and now here comes the kicking game. And it wasn't, it wasn't like a series and switching back and forth, but they did it in such a way where they were trying to mimic a game and try to get the players in that same mode of, okay, now we're on special teams. So now the guys who aren't on special teams are standing on the sideline, getting water, watching, and then now they're knowing they're about to go back out there. The guys on defense, the same thing. So you just saw stuff like that. And I mean, Staley was right from the beginning, you could tell this was super organized. He's such a good teacher. He's really passionate about teaching. He talked about it this week, and I'm telling you, he literally you get him going on teaching, and his eyes get kind of glassy, and he gets a little misty. He gets really into it. He's really emotional about it, and part of it goes back to his parents. They were both started out as teachers. His dad ended up going in a different field, but his mom was a teacher, and I'm sure when he gets into that teacher mode and he talks about that, I'm sure he's thinking about his mom, and I'm sure that gets emotional for him, and it means a lot to him, and being a teacher means a lot to him because he saw it growing up, that and how important that was, and so all of that stuff, it's really cool to talk to him about teaching because he really does, he gets passionate about that, like most football coaches get passionate about X's and O's, and he'll do that too. Don't get me wrong, he'll do that too, but you get him into that teaching mode, and it's like being in a seminar. You sit there and you almost, he can almost mesmerize a room when he starts talking about why they do things and the things he believes and education and all this stuff. It's really fascinating. He's just been a delight to be around. He is my biggest takeaway is he is a super smart guy that the Chargers will not go into games and have to worry about, is the other coach smarter than our coach? I mean, because it's not going to happen. There's some smart coaches who are like Staley, but I don't think there's anybody in the league who's smarter than he is.
It's amazing. Like it really is. And the word mesmerizing that you used really kind of sums it up for me because, I went back and listened to that press conference the other day, and the way that he talks about the philosophy aspect of teaching and coaching, you just sit there and you're like, this is amazing. Like, this is like, I feel like I'm in a legitimate coach's clinic right now.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. And the unfortunate thing for people and like what I do is it's hard to really reproduce that in a way that's meaningful, because you almost have to be sitting in there, right, and experience it, because the best way to say it, I think, is just it's like being in a seminar and teaching how, and he could go into a high school or go to the LA Unified School District and deliver a presentation that people would be up cheering at the end of it, and it would help all of them as teachers, and they are teachers for a living. I mean, he's taken it to a different level, but he literally, this guy could be the greatest high school teacher in the world if he wanted to be.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. So obviously the Chargers have finished training camp. They finished up the preseason, and with that, comes the inevitable hype trains that we've seen. A lot of people talking about Kaiser White, and rightfully so. Who have been some players that you feel like who have quietly had some really great training camps and could, launch themselves into potentially having like a breakout season this year for the Chargers?
Yeah, I mean, Kaiser is the one that we all kind of jumped out at all of us, just the way he's played, and of course with him, like all these guys, it's staying healthy. I think Drew Tranquil is another guy. Both those guys are going to be rotating in there with Kenneth Murray and the inside linebacker, so they're going to be kind of splitting snaps and taking a little bit away from each other. But I think those are two guys, I think, in this system that can just explode. I mean, Kenneth Murray is another guy. We obviously saw what he did last year, 107 tackles, and led the team, and most tackles for a rookie and all that stuff. But he, I think that is a position that the Chargers have some depth, and they have some real playmaking ability. They have there's a reason that to be excited for all three of those guys. But the middle of that defense is something I think that they're really excited about. And of course, Derwin James is back out there, and we all know what he means. And he, by all accounts, has had a great camp. Obviously, didn't play in any of the preseason games, which is smart. We all know that, and we all know there was no reason for him to be out there. But I think mostly what I saw, it was mostly the guys on defense and with Staley's background on defense, and he's going to be the one running the defense, and we saw what he did with the Rams last
Right.
year. I think that's where you can feel like, hey, if these guys can all stay on the field, they have a chance to be really good. I mean, offense gets a little bit different with the offensive line and some of the issues that could develop if there's some injuries, but I think on defense. I mean, I think there's plenty of reasons to be excited for a lot of those guys on defense, certainly.
Yeah, absolutely. I cannot wait to see Derwin James in this defense in this role. And, Chris Harry always points it out, right? Like him and Joey Bosa have played, I don't know what the exact number is, like 11 games together in the last 3 years. So it's just going to be
Yeah,
amazing to watch for those two to finally get on the field together at once.
yeah, I think it's. I think there's big potential there. We all know that, and it'll be exciting. It's just if they just hopefully can all get out there and stay out there for a while and just see where this thing goes.
Yeah, just got to go out and do it. I'm glad you mentioned the offense and the offensive line. Obviously, we didn't really get to see many starters. I think like Josh Palmer and Rashawn Slater, and then a couple, Matt Filer series that are here and there. So we haven't really seen much of the offense and those who are going to be, true contributors. What do you think the expectations are for Joe Lombardi's first year as offensive coordinator and how he's kind of melding the minds with Justin Herbert and the rest of his staff?
Yeah, I think the expectations are going to be high when you have Justin Herbert as your quarterback and Keenan Allen as one of your wide receivers, and we saw what they did last year. That instantly is going to set the bar pretty high. And I should mention, I mean, we didn't see a lot of Rayshon, but what we did see was good. It was really
Yeah.
encouraging, really promising. So I think that part of it people can be excited about too. Just the issue with him, we just didn't see a lot of it. He played the one game, and then he was dealing with some issues with his back, and so he didn't even practice a whole lot. And he missed those two joint practices with the 49ers, which would have been big to see him there. But what we've seen of him, that also is another guy who stood out when he was out there. But yeah, with the offense, we all know, everyone knows. You don't need me to come on here to tell you this. Everyone knows it comes back to what the offensive line, right?
Yeah.
And those guys' ability to stay out there. And I mean, I think we're already in camp the last couple of days. Or practice, at least. I guess we're out of camp technically now, but we're all debating: is Brian Bulaga, is he already hurt? Because he can't do a whole lot. He hasn't been doing much. I think I asked Lombardi about is this a situation where we're just not going to see him practice much all season? And Joe basically he said, yeah, he's one of those guys where he needs the reps at points, but a lot of it is muscle memory at this point. He doesn't
Yeah.
really need to be out there doing a whole lot. So even when he's healthy and even when he's available, I don't know that he's going to be practicing a ton. I think he's one of these guys. I would be shocked if he's not on the initial injury report. Maybe he won't be next week, but I think it's almost going to be inevitable that he's going to be on with something. And it's unfortunate because he's he's a good guy, and I think everyone everyone will acknowledge he seems like a pro's pro and all that. And he's obviously had some great seasons in Green Bay, but he's got a lot of mileage on him, and it's going to be one of those things. Even when he's out there playing, and even when he is as healthy as he's going to be, it's still going to be a day-to-day thing with him, just because he had a back issue last year, and
Yeah.
he said himself that that can come back at any point. You can wake up wrong, or get out of your chair the wrong way,
Yeah.
get out of your car the wrong way, and he's fighting that again. So it's all about staying healthy, and it's all about the right tackle staying healthy to begin with. And if that doesn't happen, then we're on to Plan B, and we that might not be so might not be so good for the Chargers. And all of a sudden now they've got to compromise some things to try to make up for that loss. So it's going to come down to that offensive line again. I know people hate hearing that, but that's just the reality of it.
Yeah. And for those who missed the press conference with Joe Lombardi, he did say that Storm Norton is going to be, that guy, and that they would prefer not to insert, Brandon Hymus and kick Matt Filer out to tackle. They want it to be a clean 1-for-1 and not have to move a lot of pieces around. But let's talk about that week 1 matchup against Washington. I think obviously a lot of their offense is kind of up in the air in terms of Ryan Fitzpatrick, and like I think he's an upgrade, but you never really know with him because he'll go out there one game and have 3 interceptions. The next game he'll throw 6 touchdowns. Like it's just kind of wild. And you mentioned the offensive line, which of course is a big thing, but I want to specifically focus on like the first quarter of the season because I think we've heard so many times all these coaches, they want to win the first quarter of the season. They win each quarter and then they kind of, build from there. So what do you expect from the first quarter of the season for the Chargers? And do you think like they can legitimately start out of the gate hot, or should we expect kind of a slow start while they work through the scheme and everything like that?
Yeah, I think my anticipation, none of those guys played, the offensive guys, especially, very few of them played as starters during the preseason, as we talked about. And, none of the skill guys, other than the rookies, really played in the preseason. So, there might be a little bit of a, knock the rust off, but I don't think that's going to last for long. I don't, last year, Justin Herbert adjusted pretty quickly himself. So I'm thinking that history tells us that shouldn't be a major issue. I mean, it shouldn't last, very deep into that first game, I wouldn't think. But, it's interesting because that first game at Washington, we all know Washington's defense is expected to be great, and they're going to be a handful. Even if that offensive line is 100% healthy, it's going to be a challenge. And then Fitzpatrick is just, who knows with him. If he's hot, he's he literally is almost as good as any quarterback in the league. If he's not, he can be as bad as any quarterback in the league. So a lot of it could just depend on how he plays. If he gets into it and starts going, he can really, he can win games. I don't want to say by himself, but he can certainly be very instrumental in winning games. So that's a little tricky. There's a lot of X factors in that first game, and on top of it, also just being the first game and not knowing what any of this is really going to look like. But the first 6 games are interesting because there's ways of looking at it and saying, hey, those are really tough games, and they could be really good, and they could play really well and still only win 2 games. Well, also the other side of it is how many times we've heard about how the Cowboys are going to be great. And, so Cowboys game 2, Chargers, I look at them and think Chargers probably should win that game. I mean, I don't think that's necessarily a loss. I think the game in Washington, that's a game, that Chargers certainly could win, and they probably should win. And despite all those, moving parts that we talked about, so, and then the third game is Kansas City? Do I have it in the right order? Yep. Obviously we know that is going to be that's going to be tough. We all know how tough that's going to be. That's just the way it is. It's you're playing against the one of the top 3 or 3 teams in the league. No question about that. And then the fourth game, help me out, is back at home. Game. The Raiders. Okay, Raiders Monday night, football, right? Monday night game. So it's that again. You think, oh, it's the Raiders Monday night, but it's the Raiders. Yeah, does anyone think the Raiders are going to be great? But it is a division game. It is a Monday night. But again, I look at that and think, I don't care if that stadium is 70% Raider fans. The Chargers should win that game. Just sitting here a month away or 5 weeks away, whatever it is, I look at that and think that's a game the Chargers probably should win. So we'll see by the time we get there. But so I guess what I'm saying is, I think they have a chance to start off better than a lot of people. A lot of people are thinking could be a really rough start. I think they have a chance to actually get off to a pretty decent start. Now, maybe that's 2-2, maybe it's 3-1. I think either of those are very. I mean, I think you could certainly make the argument. Let me put it that way, that they could be 3-1, and I don't think it's crazy to think that. Now, I mean, said all that, they'll be 1-3, and you'll never have me back on here.
Well, we hope to have you back on anytime, Jeff. You're always welcome here. But obviously, I do agree, right? Like the Chargers' window of opportunity or window of the variety that they can have this year really is quite drastic because, like, even though the Chiefs are great, like I wouldn't be shocked if the Chargers went in there and won. I also wouldn't be shocked if they lost to the Cowboys. Like, you never know with a team that's rebuilding like this and retooling rather. So it really could go either way in those first 6 games, in my opinion.
Yeah, and you said it. I mean, I was telling someone just the other day, I mean, these guys could win 12 games, they could win 5 games. I don't think either anywhere in between there, it's all possible. And there's a lot of teams in the NFL like that. I mean,
Yeah.
there's a handful of really good teams, there's a handful of bad teams, and then a lot of teams in the middle. And you know how this league is. It comes down to you staying healthy, having your depth if you guys get hurt, how they play, and then winning, getting a couple of breaks and winning some close games at the end. And it's really kind of it's a quirky league that way, but it literally comes down to that stuff. And I don't want to say it's all luck because it's not that, but there is an element of luck to it that we saw in 2018. These guys won a bunch of close games and they went to the playoffs. And in the last couple of years, they lost all those same games and they ended up the bottom, in the bottom of the standings one year, and then kind of in the middle last year. So I think that's what these guys are. They're anywhere in there's a wide range, as you said, that where these guys could finish, and you can look at almost every one of their games and say and make an argument that they could win or lose this game, and almost every one of them you could make a valid argument either way.
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously we're hoping that they win more games than they lose this year. So great stuff here from Jeff Miller. Chargers fans, make sure and give him a follow on Twitter at Jeff Miller LAT. Had a great article today about the Chargers' latest moves, including the signing of Trey Marshall from the Broncos. Jeff, thanks for joining me, man.
Oh, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.